It's not budgeting. Once you see where they're coming, then you have decisions. And just for decision, that word and back that's kind of like what I'm hearing here.
Yeah, which makes it perfect sense, but that side that like you're robbing ours, so you have the opportunity to get sort of start schools like a real interesting. It's like very confusing.
It's interesting.
Okay, so Shanice, I can start, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to CEC 15's June 4th special session. I'm Antonia Ferraro Martinelli, and I'll call this meeting to order at 6:35 p.m. We are here at 131 Livingston Street. Anybody who's here from the public, please sign the attendance sheet at the back of the room. Before we call the roll, I will invite the interpreters to please introduce themselves, starting with us.
It's just like
Yeah.
just saying like the prince is having difficulty.
Oh, yeah.
Making decisions. Yeah,
Is the Bengal interpreter,
Doesn't matter.
speaking?
Yes.
Sorry.
Hi, good evening. The following message will be for Bangla participants. আপনারা যারা আজকের এই মিটিংটি বাংলায় শুনতে চান সেক্ষেত্রে আপনার ফোন থেকে ডায়াল করবেন 347-966-4114। আমি আবার বলছি, ফোন থেকে ডায়াল করবেন 347-966-4114 এবং পিন চাইলে দিতে হবে 659-111-473#। পিনটি হবে 659-111-473 এবং হ্যাশ। আপনার যদি কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকে কিউএনএ বক্সে লিখতে পারেন অথবা আমাদের কাছে প্রশ্ন করবেন। ধন্যবাদ। থ্যাংক ইউ। বাংলা ইজ ডান।
Thank you. And Spanish interpreter, please.
Good evening, everybody. This message will be in Spanish. Si desea escuchar el audio en español, el número para la línea en español es 347-966-4114 y la clave de ingreso es 242-95888 raya de número, símbolo numeral. Ahora, si desea permanecer en esta sala de conferencias de Zoom para poder ver a los panelistas en su computadora, por favor silencie el micrófono de su celular y silencie el volumen de la computadora. Marquen su teléfono a la línea de conferencia en español. Nuevamente, la línea de conferencia en español es 347-966-4114 e ingrese la clave 242-95888, símbolo de numeral. Gracias.
And the Mandarin interpreter, please.
Good evening. These are the following messages in Mandarin. 大家好，如果需要听国语请拨打347-966-4114 ，ID 号码是117-960-856重复347-966-4114 ，ID 117-960-856谢谢。
Great, thank you so much. I guess I'll call the roll because our secretary is not here yet. Antonia Ferraro, yes, I'm present. Leslie King, here. Vanessa Gonzalez Uroka is not here. Maybe she'll come later. Nancy Cruz is not here. Donald Tony, present. Nancy Randall, I know she is running a PTA election tonight. Hans Arietta, he also sent in a note. Lauren Barkin, here. Mamoon Rashid has a work excuse. Stanley Vidal, present. Jonathan David, present. And I don't believe Annalie Beata is in the room either. I don't see her. Okay. At this moment, we do not have quorum, but maybe we will have quorum later. I am going to turn it over to Leslie to read the introduction.
Good evening. Thank you for coming to the District 15 Community Education Council tonight. We appreciate your time and we're glad you could join us. For those of you who are new to the CEC meetings, there are 32 CECs throughout the city, plus 4 citywide councils. Each CEC represents a community school district and each is made up of 12 volunteer members, 10 of whom are elected by parents in the district, and the remaining members are appointed by the Brooklyn Borough President and 2 high school student members. CEC 15 is a state mandated public body responsible for ensuring that public school parents and the public have input in educational decisions that are made at the school district level. Our council reviews education policies and advocates for high quality education that benefit all of our District 15 public, elementary, and middle school students. CEC 15 serves 36 elementary and middle schools and 1 high school under the oversight of our superintendent. CEC members serve an advisory role on education matters to the district superintendent, the chancellor of the Department of Education, and to the state and city elected officials. We approve district school zoning lines submitted by the Department of Education. We evaluate our district superintendent. We review the district educational programs and we support school leadership teams. We also submit recommendations for the school construction authority's annual capital plan. As of recent amendments to the law, CECs advise in the selection of parent coordinators. We actively seek input and feedback from the public and encourage you to visit our website, cecd15.org. Take a look at our Facebook page, connect with us on X, formerly Twitter, and write to us about any issues you may want to address or learn about. Each school has a CEC liaison. All of our names and contact info are available on our website. Thank you.
And Jonathan?
Tonight's special session meeting is in person and will include a public comment period. We will take both remote and in-person comments to gather additional feedback from our families and school community members. You may leave your camera on or for your own privacy. If you prefer, you may use audio only during the comment period and throughout the meeting. Rules of engagement. When you comment, please comment on the topic. Respect the privacy of others, and please do not include names of children or staff. Guests who make inappropriate comments will be removed from the meeting. During the public comment period, those attending virtually may raise their hand to comment or indicate in the chat that they would like to speak. Those called upon will be unmuted. If you are attending in person, you must sign the guest attendance sheet and indicate whether you would like to comment. Speakers will be called on one at a time, will be allowed 1 minute each per comment. We will hear as many speakers as the time allows. It is possible that not every comment and or question will be given time, so the best way to get your question answered is always to write to the CEC at cec15@schools.nyc.gov. CEC members will also be given a comment period. Members will be called upon and are each permitted 1 2-minute comment and or question. If members do not have a comment, they may cede their time to the chair.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm gonna turn the seat over to you, Superintendent Alvarez, for the Contracts for Excellence presentation, and then Linda Perez.
All right. Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin with the process. I'm Superintendent Alvarez. I want to thank you for allowing me the time on your schedule to actually engage with you on this important item, on a few important items. This evening, I'm joined by our budget matter expert, Linda Perez, who's the senior grant manager for Brooklyn North, who supports our schools with budget and grant related matters. Today, we're going to share our plan for state contracts for excellence funding. You know it as C4E, and our proposed class size reduction plan, a newer part of the Contracts for Excellence process. I will review each topic and then provide the process for public comment for each. Again, I want to thank you for allowing us time on your agenda, and we're going to dive into the presentation. throughout the presentation, you're gonna hear me giving eventually some examples that we're doing here in District 15. Today, we will discuss two topics for the upcoming 24-25 school year. I will provide an overview of the funding, share dollar amounts allocated to the DOE, and how the funding will be allocated to schools, and impose the restrictions of how some funds are spent. At the end of each topic, we will share how you can provide comments on what I've actually presented. The two topics we're here to discuss today are state C for E and class size. The state C for E portion of the presentation is being recorded. It's okay. And any feedback, public comments related to C for E will be submitted on your behalf. You may also share feedback, public comment on information shared in this presentation by using the designated email addresses noted after each topic we will cover. I will point out the designated email address at the conclusion of each topic. Our New York City Public Schools team will be taking public comments received into consideration in the coming weeks in alignment with the public process. So if we can go into that slide too, yeah, you can leave it here. The first topic being presented today, contract for excellence, also known, as I said before, C for E. First, let me provide some background on contracts for excellence. C for E legislation was established as part of the 2007-2008 enacted state budget under foundation aid and requires that a portion of foundation aid be used for specific restricted purposes. Contract for excellence requires that funding be allocated towards specific programs that raise the achievement of the students with the greatest educational needs, including but not limited to those students with limited English proficiency, students in poverty, and students with IEPs. We are required by state law to annually develop, through a public process, a citywide contract for excellence and community school district contract for excellence. The public process, how parents, teachers, and other school community members and interested parties provide input about the citywide and community school districts C for E's, and about the allocation of C for E funding in their schools. Our public process includes this meeting, as well as other meetings that superintendents will be conducting across the city with their respective CECs and 5 borough hearings that will also be happening during this period of time. Although the C for E process is not new, we have submitted a C for E plan since 2007-2008 school year. Under recent changes to state law, the timeline for the public process, including the district C for E presentations, has changed. We are now required to start the process no later than 30 days after the enactment of the state budget. And we are also required to provide notice of the public process 15 days prior to the first public hearing. State law requires that community school district contracts for excellence be presented by superintendents at CEC meetings to enable public comment on those C for E plans. To that end, we will be recording all comments made at this meeting. This important process allows families and community members an opportunity to provide input about how their schools are funded. It is an essential element in the C for E plan that the New York City Public Schools submits to the state, which the state must approve in order for the New York City Public Schools to receive C for E funding. You can stay on this slide here. Funding must be spent only within the following initiatives. For illustration, examples of programs by initiative subject to state education department approval are included below. Additional instructional time, quote unquote, time on task. Examples of that are extended day or year initiatives. Model programs for multilingual learners. An example of that is expansion of bilingual resource materials in libraries. It's just an example. Full day pre-kindergarten and kindergarten. Examples are adding classes, additional staff, and or costs related to implementing full day pre-K, or what you know as 4K. Class size reduction. Examples are hiring and placing additional teachers in a classroom to reduce the student-teacher ratio. Teacher and principal quality initiatives. Examples of that are the creation of a non-cash incentive program to encourage high-quality teachers to teach in high-needs areas. Middle or high school restructuring. Examples of that are expanding participation in advanced placement programs. Additionally, the State Education Department Commissioner may authorize districts to implement experimental programs. Such authorization must be granted in advance of implementation. More information about eligible uses and requirements may be found at New York State Education's website, which you see here on the PowerPoint at the bottom. It will also be shared as the PDF in the chat at some point today. Next slide. Each year, New York State Education Department sets New York City Public Schools contract for excellence amount based on the annual increase in foundational aid in excess of 3%. In fiscal year 25, the amount of funding we must designate toward contract for excellence is increasing by $45 million to $803 million. It is important to note that there has been $183 million of contract for excellence embedded in fair student funding since 2007, 2008. In the upcoming school year, this funding will continue to be part of fair student funding. However, it will be identified as contract for excellence and allocated separately from fair student funding. Additionally, it will be restricted to be used for teacher salaries only to ensure full utilization. This is not a new use of this allocation. It has always been assumed that contract for excellence embedded in fair student funding supported teacher salaries. This just demonstrates that more clearly. Were this funding to be used for another purpose, the DOE would not be able to continue funding all schools at 100% fair student funding. There is an additional increase in foundational aid of $137 million that is planned to be allocated to support schools in meeting the state's class size reduction mandate and may also be subject to contract for excellence. Next slide. Now for the breakdown of contract for excellence funding. We can categorize contract for excellence funding, contract for excellence allocations as discretionary and targeted. Discretionary means that schools may use contract for excellence funding in any eligible way that best meets the needs of their students. Targeted means that contracts for excellence is being used to support a specific program, and schools must use that contract for excellence funding in support of that program. Of the $803 million citywide, $487 million of it will be allocated as discretionary, C for E, and $316 million will be allocated as targeted. The $316 million of targeted programs now include $183 million of fair student funding to be used towards teacher salaries, $87 million for integrated co-teaching classrooms, $30 million for academic summer programming, $9 million for full-day pre-K, and $7 million for autism spectrum disorder classrooms. Next slide. Let's take a closer look at the citywide proposed allocations. Combined discretionary funding, existing 55.07% and new 5.61% makes up the 60.68% of the proposed allocation. Targeted allocations makes up 39.32%, with the greatest share of that being attributed to fair student funding at 22.78%. Integrated co-teaching classrooms, summer program, full-day pre-K, and autism spectrum disorder, you all know it as ASD, classrooms making up 16.55% combined. Next slide. Now, this is our proposed district allocations. So you'll see discretionary or existing funds. Schools decide on using use of this within allowable programs is at 49.77%. Along with the new discretionary, which is 6.80%, which is more than 55% of funding for discretionary use. Fair student funding in our district is allocated at 21.26%. For this district, 2.36% is for summer programming. 2.59% is for full day pre-K in our district. And 1.61% for autism spectrum disorder classrooms, which will total $22.5 million or $22.6 million, rounding off to 100% of our proposed allocation of funds for District 15. Next slide. We will take public feedback into account in the coming weeks as we continue to work towards complying with this mandate. The deadline for submitting public comment will be June 24th, 2024. Please share your comments and feedback by using the Contract for Excellence email address you see on the screen. Shanice is going to drop in the actual email in case you just want to cut and paste it into the chat. Again, the deadline for submitting public comment will be June 24th, 2024. Please share your comments and feedback by using the Contract for Excellence email address you see on the screen and what's been thrown into the chat that I see now for comments about Contract for Excellence. You have a minute for that. So we can move to the next slide. Now we're moving to the second major topic. We already discussed the Contract for Excellence funding stream. Now we will wrap up by discussing the class size reduction plan. In September 2022, Governor Hochul enacted Chapter 556. Next slide. Yes.
Sorry.
It's okay. She enacted Chapter 556 of the laws of 2022, which requires the New York City School District to create a 5-year class size reduction plan for all New York City K-12 community districts and high schools. Chapter 556 sets forth requirements that apply only to the New York City School District, including new class size caps for all public K-12 community districts and high schools. A class size reduction plan, which must be approved by the United Federation of Teachers, also known as UFT, and the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators, known as CSA, the unions representing New York City School District teachers and principals respectively, and submitted as part of the Contract for Excellence. A prescribed timeline for the public process for the development, posting, and submission of the Contract for Excellence. Annual implementation reports on the status of the class size reduction plan, penalties in the form of reduced state funding if adequate progress to reduce class sizes is not made. The law imposes specific class size caps within the New York City School District for the first time. Prior legislation required a plan to reduce average class sizes and did not set forth specific average class size caps. Class size caps have previously been set subject to collective bargaining agreements between New York City Public Schools and the UFT and could be exceeded in certain circumstances. As a reminder, the law prescribes specific class size caps. 20 students in K-3, 23 students in 4 through 8, and 25 students in 9 to 12, and 40 students in physical education and performing groups across all grades. On May 7th, New York City Public Schools released a draft version of the class size reduction plan for the 24-25 school year. As a reminder, this plan must be signed off on by the United Federation of Teachers and the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators. In addition to the New York City Public Schools, the posted version has not been signed off on by the UFT or CSA at this time. As noted in the plan itself, New York City Public Schools is currently in compliance with the law for the 23-24 school year, which is this year currently in. New York City Public Schools anticipates continuing to be in compliance for the 24-25 school year and has named policy changes in the plan that will ensure we will meet the compliance target of 40% for the 24-25 school year. The draft plan includes specific actions for schools, along with the breadth of commitments to implementation that we are undertaking across the New York City Public Schools central offices, alongside the School Construction Authority, which I will discuss in more detail on the next slide. The public is able to provide feedback on the draft plan via this process. The email to share feedback is the final slide of this section. Now I will highlight some components of the draft plan. At the start of the draft plan, we highlight critical data points regarding current compliance across the city. Our compliance rate for the 23-24 school year is 40%. The required benchmark for this school year is actually 20%. The change proposed in the plan, we believe, will ensure we continue to meet the benchmark for the fiscal year 24-25 of 40%. Data shows that the district with the greatest percentage of classes at or below the class size cap are in districts 23, Ocean Hill and Brownsville, District 7, Mott Haven and Melrose, and District 16, Stuyvesant Heights and Crown Heights, District 26, Bayside and Glen Oaks, District 28, Forest Hill, Jamaica Hills, and District 31, Staten Island, have the lowest percentage of classes at or below the class size caps. The Bronx is the most compliant borough with 54% compliance, while Staten Island is the least compliant at 24%. Our highest need quartile of schools are 62% compliant. Our lowest need quartile of schools are 25% compliant. We continue to expect to need 10 to 12,000 teachers, of which 3,000 to 4,000 would be in special education. Next, I will provide an overview of key components of the plan. The draft plan includes the development of district-level targets for all districts across the city. All superintendents, including myself, of schools covered by the law, will be asked to improve compliance across their district by 3%. In District 15, we are currently at 42%, meaning class size reduction. I'll go into some of the things that I've been doing to increase that 3% and actually go a little further than 3%. This includes an accompanying menu of possible options that superintendents and teams can work with schools to implement, and includes strategies like repurposing space, maximizing teacher programming, fully programming existing instructional space, reallocating funding to support class size reduction, utilizing multi-session programming, and considering virtual learning as a possible strategy. This approach allows New York City Public Schools to drive compliance at a citywide scale, which is the expectation of the state, while the flexibility for superintendents and schools to determine the best path forward for their schools and community context. The draft plan also outlines the addition of funding for class size, including the additional $45 million in contract for excellence funding, which can also be used for class size or any other eligible purposes, and an additional $137 million that schools may be used for class size, but may also be subject for contract for excellence. You can still go back to the previous slide. Yeah, thank you. The draft plan also outlines a significant effort around teacher recruitment and hiring. These action items include providing a robust package of hiring resources to schools, including an early application window for hiring teachers in high-need schools, peer recruiters, school tours for prospective candidates in the Bronx, and increasing the number of early recruitment stipends. New York City Public Schools also commits to expanding pathways for current New York City Public School students to become teachers with work within the Office of Student Pathways and in supporting paraprofessionals and teacher aides in becoming teachers. New York City Public Schools also outlines its commitment around capital planning with the School Construction Authority to ensure that we are working collectively to increase the number of available seats where there are needs. Included in the report is a table that illustrates the timing and school district impacts for 27,000 seats coming online from the previous capital plan, as well as detailed list of which schools will positively impacted by the new construction. The class size working group met through most of 2023 to deeply understand the law and make recommendations to the chancellor to consider as New York City Public School works to implement the law. The draft plan does not act on many of the class size working groups recommendations, does act on many of the class size working groups recommendations, including the following recommendations from each committee. Number one, From the enrollment and space and capital planning committees, relevant New York City Public School divisions should work together with SCA on a unified class size plan. Develop and implement an information gathering survey. New York City Public Schools should develop a plan that includes repurposing and maximizing existing school space. Recognize the need for more school space and capital construction. Improve strategies to identify sites for schools and expand classroom space. The second group, hiring and staffing subcommittee. Beginning in the 23-24 school year, the working group recommends prioritizing hiring teachers with an early application window for higher need schools that have class sizes above the mandated limits located in the harder to staff districts. Create a formalized process for human resources in the New York City Public Schools to perform exit interviews. Collaborate with SUNY, CUNY, and regional universities to help connect New York City Public Schools with undergraduates. Work with current New York City Public School students and graduates to develop pathways to become teachers. And build and strengthen pipelines for paraprofessionals and teacher aides to actually become teachers in our schools. And the last group, Budget and Finance Committee, New York City Public Schools should engage in modeling that does not just consider overall expense, but the ability for a wide range of types of schools to meet costs. Aggressively pursue new opportunities for potential funding from New York State and federal sources, including New York City Public Schools, increasing their advocacy for their funds. As a reminder, this is a draft version that has not yet been signed off by the United Federation of Teachers or Council of School Supervisors and Administrators, who are required to sign off on our final plan. We will now share the process for providing feedback on the draft class size reduction plan on the following slide. Next, we will consider all feedback received on our proposed plan during the public process. The deadline for submitting public comment for this will be June 24, 2024. Those who wish to provide feedback may submit their comments by email to classsize@schools.nyc.gov, which you also see on the screen, and Shanice will place that in the chat as well. Again, deadline, June 24th for comment, public comment. The email is classsize@schools.nyc.gov. This concludes the actual presentation. Please be mindful that all of the email addresses provided for public comment for each section. I want to thank you for your time. I'm going to let you return to your important end of the year meeting agenda. But before I do, I want to thank everyone in the community for the hard work and collaboration this school year. I wish you all a great summer. Hopefully some vacation time is much needed. And look forward to the remaining success of the 23-24 school year into our successful beginning launch of the 24-25 school year. I'm going to stop the presentation there, and I'm definitely here to answer as many questions as I can with my partner, Linda Perez here.
So we will now open it up to questions or comments from those of you on Zoom. Is there anybody that has a question or comment for the superintendent? Are there any questions or comments through the translation lines?
No questions in the Spanish channel, please.
No questions in Bangla line too.
No questions from Mandarin line. Thank you.
We don't have anybody here in person to ask questions. So we will move to CEC member questions or comments. Donaldo? Laura? Leslie? Vanessa? Thank you.
Thank you. Just a note, Mayor announced this morning in partnership with City Council to restore the $127 million toward our city schools. So that everyone knows, our middle schools now will have their CBO extended time till 6 p.m. instead of 4 p.m. And they will also have the Fridays with the CBO from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. There's also $75 million that's been allocated to hold schools harmless for deficits they may have had this particular school year. So any of the schools who owes money for whatever reason into the next fiscal year will not be responsible to have to pay that money back. They will be able to start with whatever their budgets are going to be. Budgets haven't been provided yet. It's my expectation that they'll start next week. It's what we're being told, that they'll be able to start those budget conversations next week. My district team will be at every single school's budget meeting to provide support in how they're aligning their budget to their CEPs for their schools. Remember that the budgets that they're being allocated are based on register projections and not actual numbers at this time.
Actually, I do have two questions real quick. With regard to the whole harmless, have schools had to already access teachers or make certain hard decisions based on?
They haven't yet until they
Okay.
receive their budgets. They're expected to have those conversations next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my other question is, you had mentioned something about a 3% increase in compliance
Yes.
with, could you just explain?
Yeah.
exactly?
So right now, the city is what's being held accountable for the state expectations of the 20, 40, 60, 80, 100% class size reduction. In year one, which is this year, we're expected to be at 20%, right? As a city, the city's at approximately 40%. So we're already meeting the threshold for next year as a city. But then in order to make sure that we're consistently increasing, every district has been asked to move their district by 3%.
Even if you're in compliance.
Correct.
Still.
So right now in District 15, we are at 42% compliance. Next year, they're asking us to at least get to 45%. I would imagine that we're going to exceed that as we've done a few things. We had the annex building for 321, which was overutilized. That provided them the space on President Street, which will probably expand their particular space, which will allow them to actually meet class size reduction. Next year, we're thinking about a merger of two schools, and we're in the process of that. That would help us meet the additional threshold. With that happening, I'm able to move some seats in the middle school, which will provide threshold for the middle school. And then in one of the other middle schools, when I opened the annex at 321, we added 3 of the pre-Ks of families that were going to the Bishop Ford campus to the 321 site, which is where their families were going anyway, which allowed for expansion of 442 a little bit to meet class size reduction there. So I believe that all the things that we're putting in place already for next year will supersede that 3% threshold that we are being asked by as a district to meet in the future.
Thank you. Right, David, go ahead.
So mine is, you brought up Mayor Adams's shift in the budget. I believe I read this morning that he was not going to be giving back money towards the pre-K and 3K. And so there was still gonna be a significant loss. I think like 75 million. It's a significant amount of money. So I was just wondering what the district is going to do to account for that, especially as you're talking about,
Yeah.
Moving pre-K sites over to 321.
Good question. None of the programs in District 15 are being affected by the 3K, 4K reduction in funding. We have actually been able to maintain the spaces. So what we did was, for example, the 3 spaces that sat in the Bishop Ford, we just moved them over to another site. So we didn't lose 3 spaces. We just moved them from one site to another where the children were already going. So we looked at the numbers, the addresses, and everything else that aligned to who was applying for those schools. So we were able to do that. So we did what was, from my perspective, a lift and shift. We moved from here to here. We didn't add additional programs, but we didn't reduce any additional programs. So another site, we moved 1 pre-K program from PS 38 and moved it to the new school site 456, which is going to be the new school on State Street. So it wasn't you lose the program, we took it away from 38, it was shifting it to 456 to balance out within that particular area in the zip code. So if you notice, we were focusing on trying to connect the zip code. So in district, I can't speak to the other districts, but specifically for District 15, we have lost no pre-K programs. All of our pre-K programs are resuming the same. We haven't added any new pre-K programs. It looks like we did, we just shifted from one site to another.
But the loss of funding isn't gonna make you close any of the
Correct.
programs.
Not for District 15.
I have two questions. One
Sure.
is, for the next calendar year, or for the next school year, is there any impact to gyms, libraries, music and art rooms in order to execute class size reduction in any of these
Yeah.
schools?
Not right now, no. I don't foresee that being affected. You mean like turning libraries into classrooms,
Right.
gym space? Yeah, no. We don't see that. What I've been trying to do is finding where we have space and where we can make amicable changes. So like if a building's overutilized and another building is underutilized and has space issues, how do we combine so that we're creating the utilization of both spaces to even out the utilization so that we don't have to go into taking over libraries, taking over gyms, taking over art spaces. That's exactly why I'm looking at that. 321 was a perfect example, the first start of it, where I wouldn't know what to do. We would have, as a CEC, we probably would have had to think about rezoning that area. As a result of adding them to the new building, instead of adding a brand new school, expanding the school, expanding the space of the site allowed for 321 to be able to maintain its about roughly 1,200 students and still meet class size reduction without losing libraries, without losing other spaces. In fact, we did better. We were able to move them out of that mini building that they so desperately been wanting to get out of. And now they have a brand new space that's state of the art, and the technology and the furniture and everything is not being paid for by the school because it's a new construction. So they're getting all of that for free. So that's why 321 helps, because it was the most crowded in the Park Slope. The only concern I have is for 38 and 107, which we can talk at a later time. What can we do in those particular spaces? And I have some ideas that we can meet, but also remember that what the state law talks about in class size reduction is that in certain places you can probably make exceptions, right? And so if the schools and those two schools are performing relatively high, there's maybe an opportunity for us to create the exception for those two schools, knowing the conditions and the spaces that
You mean
exist.
39?
I keep saying 38, I always do that, 39 and 107, correct. Yeah, so there might be a opportunity to be able to maintain those schools the way they are without having to worry about class size reduction because of some extenuating factors that if we can get the chancellor, CSA, and UFT to agree upon, we might be able to keep those sites the way they are. And to be honest with you, those are the only two sites that are giving me the most concern when it comes to utilization right now, because we've been able to expand some of the other schools, and I'm trying to make room for the middle schools as well.
You're right,
Yeah.
given the architecture, that's understandable. My second question is, will you and, I'm so sorry that I just lost your name on our agenda,
Liz,
Ms. Perez, be able to stay while we discuss this PS15 budget?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Just, there's a lot of technicalities here
Yeah.
that maybe need some unpacking.
Yeah.
That would be really helpful, thank you.
Donald, do you mind if we copy that so that we can get ourselves in context? Yeah.
There's some on the table too.
Oh, it's already on the table? Okay, so yeah, so we'll take the one on the table, that's fine. that way we can read it while you guys are having your
Yeah.
business meeting, and then we'll jump in whenever you need, okay? Yeah, yes.
Thank you very much.
Good.
That it?
All right.
Let's do it.
We'll just read that and then. Thank you. Just hand me over. whenever you're
Okay. Okay, everybody, we have four, right? Take that. So, tonight we have a resolution to prevent and respond to hate speech. We've been working on this resolution for a very long time now. It's gone through quite a journey. Went through many rewrites. I consulted with many voices, many parents, district staff, even the Peace Institute. I want to thank Natalia Trapagante and Amy Ballwater for entrusting their initial draft and this very difficult conversation with CEC 15. I also want to thank all the parents who provided feedback during our communications committee meeting that was dedicated to this resolution. I want to thank my fellow council members for their patience and their willingness to go on this journey. Council's function on consensus. And we are 12 members with very different experiences and perspectives, and that makes compromise critical to accomplishing anything as a group. And the work on this resolution was no different in that regard. I want to reiterate that public schools are for everyone. CEC 15 deplores, rejects, and opposes hate speech. Our schools and parent bodies have a duty to love, support, protect unconditionally all the children of the district. And that was my guiding principle through this process. We expanded on the original author's text and included public feedback. We also aimed to take out the political and add the people. A very wise woman, a Jewish woman, you may remember her, former superintendent Anita Scott, gave me that advice. And her words were my guiding light through this process, and I hope we were successful. So I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan to read the resolution. I'll share my screen.
The CEC 15 resolution to prevent and respond to hate speech in New York City public schools. Whereas the CEC 15 vision statement affirms that CEC 15 is dedicated to a meaningful, innovative, and inclusive way of educating children that allows students to thrive in every aspect of their enriched academic, social, and emotional growth. Our collaborative, successful, and high-achieving schools embrace diversity in every form and encourage each of our students to explore their interests in finding and nurturing their many hidden talents. In partnership with families, our school leaders and educators help our children and young adults find their voice, build self-confidence, and develop their ability to become independent thinkers and productive, caring people responsible for shaping an equitable society. Whereas CEC 15 is committed to fostering an open and inclusive atmosphere within our schools. Whereas in 2018, CEC 15 supported the recommendations of the District 15 Diversity Plan, henceforth known as the Diversity Plan. In the resolution to support the District 15 Diversity Plan, CEC 15 stated, CEC 15 believes that all children, irrespective of race, socioeconomic status, religion, immigration status, or disability, have a right to a great education in a safe environment. Whereas the recommendations of the Diversity Plan, which developed through a year-long public engagement process, seek to foster middle schools that are diverse, equitable, integrated, and inclusive. Whereas the resolution applies to all non-criminal acts of bias, including anti-Arab hate, anti-Asian hate, anti-Black hate, anti-Hispanic hate, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or other prejudice, xenophobia, or racism against any group due to their race, ethnicity, national origin, including shared ancestry or ethnic characteristics, religion, abilities, gender, sexuality, age, or any other protected category under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and its implementing regulations. Whereas the resolution states, when members of our community have been harmed, whether intentionally or not, we must all rally around the harmed, especially a harmed child, creating a balance through restorative practices. Whereas CEC 15 reaffirms our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, clarifies existing frameworks for addressing hate speech, and recommits to recommendations outlined in the Diversity Plan and in the resolution discussed herein. Whereas since October 7th, both anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents have dramatically risen in the US and across the globe. Whereas New York City is a global city where global traumas may be directly or indirectly experienced by students and staff and thus enter our school discourse. Whereas the tri-state area has the largest community of Jews outside of Israel, including many New York City public school students and staff. Whereas New York State has the largest population of Muslims in the United States, including many New York City public school students and staff. Whereas we recognize that students across New York City come from diverse backgrounds and have varying perspectives on global issues, and it is our duty to encourage them to express their opinions respectfully and peacefully while fostering an environment that promotes tolerance, empathy, and fact-based knowledge. Whereas hate speech against any group due to their race, ethnicity, religion, national origin, including shared ancestry or ethnic characteristics, abilities, gender, sexuality, age, or any other protected category is damaging to education and has no place in our schools or community. Whereas hate speech is a form of discrimination and harmful to humanity. Whereas a learning environment requires and flourishes in an atmosphere that protects against discrimination, prejudice, and fear. Whereas school leaders, teachers, and school staff are charged to work collaboratively with the superintendent and their team to provide all students with safe, respectful, and inclusive learning environments that support students' well-being, academic achievement, and social growth. Whereas the superintendent of District 15 is responsible for identifying gaps in programming and needs in the context of the entire district with major community and parent input, providing data briefings on identified issues, and collaborating meaningfully with the council to develop district-wide plans for emergent issues, of which preventing hate speech is an identified need. Whereas the superintendent is responsible to solicit the support and effective partnership of the Office of Safety and Youth Development, OSYD, to ensure that District 15 schools are equipped to provide all students with safe, respectful, and inclusive learning environments that support students' well-being, academic achievement, and social growth. While the superintendent's leadership is primary, OSYD works in partnership with the superintendent and his team to take a proactive role in nurturing students' pro-social behavior by providing youth development and student support services, such as social emotional learning training and curriculum, restorative practices, anti-bullying resources, LGBTQ+ and gender equity supports, crisis intervention, gang prevention supports, and progressive disciplines, promote respect for diversity, and establish and implement integrated school safety, school climate, and counseling policies and practices, implement the citywide behavior expectations and the K-12 Student Bill of Rights and Responsibilities fairly and consistently. Whereas school community members are encouraged to report any allegations of inappropriate speech to their school's principal, or may file an online report with the Office of Special Investigation, OSI, as specified in Chancellor's Regulation A421 against verbal abuse. Discrimination and harassment are further defined by Chancellor's Regulations A830, A831, and A832, and may also be reported to the Special Commissioner of Investigation pursuant to the Mayor's Executive Order number 11. If the allegation is against the principal, or if the school community member is uncomfortable reporting it to the principal for any reason, then they may report the allegations to the Family Support Coordinator in the Superintendent's office. Allegations will be reviewed by the Office of Equal Opportunity, OEO, the OSI, or independently by the Special Commissioner of Investigation, SCI, to determine if they require corrective action. Whereas all New York City educators are mandated to report incidents of hate speech and aggression within the Online Occurrence Reporting System, OORS, and the Office of Special Investigation within 24 hours of report of such an incident. Whereas we acknowledge the mayor's recent release of Teaching About Hate Crimes and Their Impacts, a series of hate crimes lessons designed to teach students in New York City public schools about hate crimes and bias incidents, as well as their impact on individuals and communities. Whereas we acknowledge the efforts that New York City Public Schools has made to meet the goal of open and inclusive schools by providing resources, including general social studies, current events guidance, New York City Public Schools Social Studies webpage, Arab American Heritage Month, Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and Jewish American Heritage Month. Whereas the Office of Family and Community Empowerment, FACE, is currently conducting a three-part series of anti-discrimination professional development in partnership with the New York City Commission on Human Rights. This series, designed for parent leaders, discusses the Muslim, Jewish, and Black experience in order to combat discrimination. Whereas we also acknowledge the efforts of District 15 to put equity support teams in place, including school-based equity teams and SLT equity committees that convene a district-wide equity congress, and school-based student equity teams that convene a district-wide student equity congress. Whereas the diversity plan recommended the creation of a centrally funded, full-time District 15 Diversity, Equity, and Integration Coordinator that partners with District 15 administrators, educators, staff, parents, and students on diversity and integration initiatives. Whereas the District 15 DEI Coordinator recommendation has been fulfilled. Whereas while the District 15 DEI Coordinator may attend district leadership team meetings, neither the DEI Coordinator nor the representative of the equity support teams is required to attend monthly DLT meetings. Whereas the diversity plan also recommended the creation of a centrally funded, full-time restorative justice coordinator position tasked with implementing, supporting, and tracking a district-wide approach to restorative practices at all District 15 middle schools. And whereas while a centrally funded, full-time restorative justice coordinator does not yet exist, the student services manager is tasked with restorative justice work and is the centrally funded Office of School Safety and Youth Development, or SYD. Therefore, be it resolved that CEC 15 condemns all forms of hate speech, whether it comes in the form of anti-Arab hate, anti-Asian hate, anti-Black hate, anti-Hispanic hate, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and other forms of discrimination against any group due to their race, ethnicity, national origin, including shared ancestry or ethnic characteristics, religion, abilities, gender, sexuality, age, or any other protected category whenever and wherever they occur, and affirm that hate speech is a form of discrimination. Be it resolved that New York City Public Schools develop and offer age-appropriate materials for grades K through 8 that not only analyze deep-rooted, systemic, historic biases and hatred, but affirm a common sense of humanity amongst classmates to ensure safe, responsible conversations. All materials shall be factually and historically accurate, not promote a single ideology, and be in compliance with New York State Law, Article 17-801. Such materials shall include ableism and materials on the history of discrimination against individuals with disabilities, including the vast contributions of people with disabilities to America throughout the country's history. Asian American Pacific Islander AAPI history materials, including the vast contributions of AAPI to America throughout the country's history. African American history materials, including the vast contributions of African Americans to America from the country's inception. Hispanic and Latinx history materials, including the vast contributions of Hispanic and Latinx people to America throughout the country's history. Holocaust and genocide education. Jewish American history materials, including the history of the Israeli people and the vast contributions of Jewish Americans throughout the country's history. LGBTQIA plus materials, including the vast contributions of LGBTQIA plus individuals to America throughout the country's history. Middle Eastern and ethnic studies materials, including the history of the Palestinian people and the vast contributions of Arab Americans. Native American indigenous history materials, including the vast contributions of Native American indigenous people to America throughout the country's history, and women's history materials, including the vast contributions of women to America throughout the country's history. Be it resolved that New York City Public Schools require all staff participating in culturally responsive and trauma-informed anti-oppression and anti-hate speech training, which recognizes the connection between anti-Arab hate, anti-Asian hate, anti-Black hate, anti-Hispanic hate, anti-Semitism, homophobia, Islamophobia, and transphobia. This training should be facilitated by a relevant external organization, which has been selected through an inclusive process by school leadership in consultation with educators and school community members based on the organization's ability to fulfill the above criteria. Be it resolved that CEC 15 asks the district and New York City Public Schools to promote media literacy for CEC 15 students. Be it resolved that New York City Public Schools, through the Office of School Safety and Youth Development, OSYD, will work with principals and school communities to form a restorative practices team to, 1, recognize and acknowledge the harm done, 2, take responsibility for the harm, 3, take action to repair the harm, and 4, take action to prevent the recurrence of the harm. Be it resolved that equity support teams in District 15, the District 15 DEI coordinator in consultation with the superintendent and the student services manager will work with the new restorative practices team on district-based concerns as well as school-based concerns. Be it resolved where the restorative practices team has exhausted all options, OSYD will intervene with the mediation process that includes relevant stakeholders guided by an outside organization that specializes in addressing harm and distinguishing harm from discomfort chosen by the impacted communities, where the process will be meaningful and clearly defined in terms of goals and timeline. Be it resolved that the DEI coordinator and a parent representative of the district-wide Equity Congress shall be required to attend the monthly district leadership team meetings. Be it resolved that New York City Public Schools shall sustain and fulfill the following recommendations outlined in the diversity plan and the resolution. New York City Public Schools continue to fund a full-time District 15 Diversity, Equity, and Integration Coordinator that partners with District 15 administrators, educators, staff, parents, and students on diversity and integration initiatives. New York City Public Schools fund a full-time restorative justice coordinator tasked with implementing, supporting, and tracking a district-wide support for restorative practices. New York City Public Schools require regular, ongoing, anti-bias, anti-racism, ABAR education workshops and offer access to readings, videos, community-led teach-ins, and other resources, including individual mentors, to promote greater understanding of systemic inequities and how they intersect with individual strengths and struggles to allow for our communities to grow together in our humanity and model lifelong learning for our children. And whereas these resources are available not only to DOE staff, but to families and in their home languages, and through small group listening sessions, District 15 administrators will partner authentically with their schools' equity support teams, students, families, and educators to generate, pilot, codify, and continually refine collaborative community engagement practices, especially in co-located schools. And be it further resolved that CEC 15 will continue to uphold the values of diversity, equity, and inclusivity in our educational mission, emphasizing the importance of understanding and cooperation among all students, including tolerance, understanding, empathy, respect for human dignity.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for reading that.
Okay, so we will now move to public comments. We'll start with people joining us on Zoom. If there is anybody that has a comment or question, please let us know. We have applause from somebody. Any other comments or questions from people on Zoom?
This is Amy. I just wanted to say thank you so much for all of your work on this. It's really appreciated.
Thank you, and thank you for helping to initiate this.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? People on Zoom. Another appreciation in the chat. Anybody in the translation lines?
No question in Bangla line.
No question in Mandarin line.
We'll now move to comments or questions from people in person. Yeah.
So first I have a logistical question. If I ask a question, is that part of my public comment time?
Yes.
It is. Okay. And I get how long?
A minute, but
you're
we
the
have,
only
you're the only
But
person talking, so we
I'm from
can.
New York, so I can talk.
We reserve the right to
Start with the
stop
comment.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So thank you for my name is Hallie Chertok and I have 2 kids in District 15. I'm in, since it's relevant to this, I'm a New York student. I really appreciate all the work and I got involved in this just about 3 weeks ago, so I missed some of the first drafts. One of my comments is that it seems like this is trying to do 2 separate things. And that I find that problematic. It's trying to be a very general, with some parts that very beautifully written anti-hate speech resolution. And it's also trying to address a specific moment in politics where as a country and as a culture and as a world, we struggle to deal with the relationship between Israel and the Middle East. And so I find that my comments vary, but depending on which one it really is. And so I will go with the second one, if this is trying to take a moment in time and say this is actually trying to be about making sure that people aren't conflating comments with being anti-Semitic or Islamic or Islamophobia that you're trying to cover that. And I would say it doesn't go far enough. And so, and it also has some problematic statements. So I would say it doesn't go far enough to, really lay it out. So I would say one problematic spot is on page 2. I think it's not relevant to say that the tri-state area is the largest community of Jews outside of Israel. I think they're conflating Jews with Israel because inappropriate, most Jews do not have any connection to Israel and are not from Israel. And so that should not be say that. It should say, if you really want to have that whereas in there, you should say that has the largest community of Jews in the United States, the way that it says that about the Muslim population. This has nothing to do with Israel. Another spot, again, related to conflating Israel and Jews together, is on page 6, where it says Jewish American history materials down about halfway in the resolve. It says Jewish American history materials, including the history of the Israeli people. That shouldn't be in there. You can just take that, I would say take that out and just have Jewish American history materials and the vast contributions of Jewish Americans throughout the country's history, because Israel does not represent, the Jewish culture.
I think those are political comments that you're making.
Well, we're going to make our comments, we'll grant you a moment to give a comment soon.
And then I'd say that what you're missing from this also is really expanding, you say in the beginning, expanding on making sure you're specifying the things that people are worried are going to be construed as either anti-Semitic or as Islamophobic. And so I think there could be some additional, I'm sure Amy will have the opposite comment of me of which things she wants included, but including some that really make clear that teaching about Palestine is not some anti-Semitic, or teaching about the Nakba is not anti-Semitic, or that talking about Palestinians having their own and their right to exist as a nation is not anti-Semitic. Speaking about the history of Palestine, it's not anti-Semitic. Criticizing a government of Israel is not anti-Semitic, the way so many of us have probably criticized the government of this country, the United States. And that does not that is criticizing the government's actions and not criticizing its people. And especially not of one specific, religion. I would even say go so far as to, get specific about some of the issues that have come up, like by adding specifically that if people are saying from the river to the sea, that reflects hope that all Palestinians enjoy equal rights and freedom, and it is not an anti-Semitic statement. And you could also.
I think this is turning into a speech. I do think this is turning.
I'm on a timer here and I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a minute, not a speech.
Wait, hold on a second. Everybody's gonna have a chance to, comment. And so right now, we're gonna finish this out and then we'll get to, more public comment.
So anyway, so I would say that if you're trying to really get this focused in on responding to the moment right now, then you need more specifics about that to help teachers know what is okay to be teaching and to protect teachers and students from being claimed that it's hate speech. I am Jewish. I just want to remind the person who's commenting that I'm saying this as a Jew. If you want to hear, I have like distant relatives who were involved in the Zionist movement. I have relatives in Israel. So I am speaking this as someone who is not disconnected from Israel. And so I feel like that those things are missing. And then I think if it's instead trying to be a more general anti-hate speech, then a lot of it's kind of awkward. Like, why do you just put in that they're about Jews and Muslims, and not speak about, increasing hate that is happening in our country against Black people. And so, it's kind of like that part, if you're trying to just make like more of it seem, some parts of it may seem like they're very general anti-hate speech, but then it gets awkwardly interrupted by like only specifying this issue in the whereas in September 7th, the whereas about the tri-state area's largest community of Jews, whereas New York has the largest population of Muslims. And then also, some of the specifics about teaching, getting into the history and the material that will be used, for teaching. So I think
Okay.
I'm happy to
Yep.
comment more. Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we had somebody who wanted to comment on Zoom.
Sorry that, this is Amy. Is there anyone
Yeah,
else or
go ahead.
did you mean me?
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Okay, so, I see that you've mentioned you just, got involved 3 weeks ago and this is something that's been going on for a while. I'll just make some notes here. I think it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not, you can be against hate speech. And so I don't think saying I'm Jewish or I'm XYZ provides much support for anyone's points. And that aside, I do know that the DOE is working hard on improving its curriculum to deal with bias and hate and anti-Semitism and anti-Arab hate and all the many others. And you're right, when we mention anti-hate, we're not going to be able to include, it would take probably 3 days to write a list of every group not to hate. And so, yeah, this is a bit of a moment in history, but it could also be emblematic that hate in general is bad and set an example. So if God forbid, or, heaven forbid, there's another group that's experiencing hate in the future that we can't anticipate at the moment, that we can lean on this sort of anti-hate language to help that particular group not experience so much hate. And I do think a lot of your comments are politically biased, which is completely fine. You are completely entitled to your opinion. And I do think actually, hopefully the DOE curriculum and a lot of other good literature out there will help clarify many of the points you made, and you're still completely entitled to your opinion. And I think it's probably pretty great that we didn't get too granular in this this resolution, because we can't anticipate every nuance and every comment and how everything will be interpreted now and then how it will change a few months out. those are just my thoughts.
Great, thank you. Are
Could
there
I
any
have one
remaining-
more comment on Zoom as well,
Yeah,
when there's a
yeah,
chance?
go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks, this is Sarah Gartenberg. One thing I'd like to comment on in terms of, I just looked at, I was screenshotting as I went to make sure I could say the right thing. I'm not sure what page it is. But I see that the reference to Israel and Palestine, I believe they used exactly the same words, which I think is very helpful. It says, including the history of the Israeli people and including the history of the Palestinian people, and didn't go into any other specifics after that, which I think is very appropriate and does make that side does make that page kind of very consistent. So I just wanted to point out that I believe that objection, I wanted to at least say something. I read those the same way, and as giving kind of teachers and staff the ability to treat that properly and ethically, so that everybody gets their voice heard. And I see a lot of different people here mentioned: Native Americans, Middle Eastern, and ethnic study materials, Asian American, Pacific Islander, and it seems to all use African American history, all use the same words. And I'm very appreciative that you did this, so everybody can have a voice in our district. Thanks.
Any remaining questions or comments from those on Zoom who have not had a chance to speak? Yes, Taylor.
Hi, I just wanted to thank you guys so much for all the work that you put into this, first off. I just had a quick question. I noticed that there wasn't any mention of the violence that's happening in Palestine and especially Gaza in this, and I was just wondering why you chose to omit that.
If you heard my remarks at the beginning of the reading, my guiding light was to take the politics out of this and put in the people. This is really about how we treat our students in New York City. It's a student-centered document, so that would be why.
Yeah, I didn't, I was actually, sorry, my child's here. I was there, I noticed that October 7th was referenced, but the violence afterward against Palestinians was not, so that's why I asked, but thank you for answering.
Yeah, and that we had a lot of discussions around that point, and we went through so many different drafts, and we in the end decided to keep the October 7th statement because that was the impetus for this resolution was, and what was going on across the district. And so we felt that being able to keep that moment as something that instigated a lot of the dialogue around hate speech was important to have in this resolution without getting into some of the politics surrounding it. And so in early versions, we did have some of the statistics of what was happening in Israel and Gaza and around the hostages and the people who had been killed. And we felt after a lot of dialogue with a lot of different people that to make the important statement against anti-hate speech and to lift up the voices of everybody in the district, it would be a stronger resolution to remove those political elements. And I mean, not just politics. I mean, these are people who are being affected, but it is something that has impacted a lot of people in very charged ways around their dialogue around what's happening once we start to infuse a lot of the specifics of what's been happening in the war. And so we wanted to make sure that we could really focus as a district on how we can create greater dialogue and support and work against any form of discrimination or hate speech that would exist in the district, rather than those details. Any other questions or comments from people that have not had a chance to speak? Let's move to CEC comments or questions. Ronaldo?
Family? Or?
Vanessa?
I just want to thank everybody. I know that this has been very, work intensive for everybody. Well, I appreciate everybody's time on it. And I appreciate you explaining why, the October 7th, the paragraph was included. I just wanted to echo what you said, Vanessa, and thank you so much for all the hard work. I know this, it took a lot of people getting together and working on this and going to draft to really come to this. Like, I think that it did exactly what you said, really emphasizes hate speech and keeps it about this specific one. Also, I like that it's about all the things.
The only thing I want to ask the council to do is there was a comment from our in-person person. On page 2, the tri-state area has the largest community of Jews in the US instead of outside of Israel. Is that okay?
Are you making a motion?
I'm making a motion to change that just to in the US.
Second?
Okay, can't raise hands. I'm okay with that. Your person is right. Large community Jews in the US.
Well, it's the largest.
I would put
Yeah.
United States.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't.
Just to be
But I
consistent.
think the largest outside of Israel. Yeah, probably. That should.
It is, it is.
Yeah. You're right, I do that on fact checkers that have made staff. Like that.
I know that I know from where the source comes from. So, with that, I'd like to make a motion to adopt this resolution.
Yes.
Can anybody, second, is that Donald?
Yes, it was.
Um. I'll call the roll, Antonio Ferrer, yes, I vote yes to approve this resolution, Leslie King,
Yes.
Vanessa Gonzalez.
Yes.
Cruz is not here, Donalda Chumney.
Yes.
Nancy Rand is not here. Lauren Larkin.
Yes.
Danley Vidal.
Yeah.
Jonathan Davis.
Yes.
Okay, great. We have passed this resolution. Thank you so much. Right, so what time did it get to be? It's 10 after 8.
That's the wrong time. 7.
Oh, that's, oh, good. Oh, it's 7:57. So it's basically 8 o'clock. We can either go into this resolution on transparency, or I can make a motion that we just go into executive session, deal with the vacancy. Because I have a feeling that will be a quick conversation, and then we can come back and have a longer conversation about this SLT resolution. Okay, is that okay?
No, I'm going to vote no on the
Okay.
executive session, and I will not be attending. So you all can just do it that way you will, but I'm hoping that we can talk about this SLT resolution because we have had our budget director and our superintendent stay for the conversation.
Okay, so if Donalda is not going to participate in the vote to fill the vacancy.
We don't vote out here.
We voted.
We do vote out.
We do.
Then you just aren't gonna go into executive session.
No.
Okay. that's
still-
fine, but we
That's
could
right.
still go into executive session without an alternate and then come back. And so the question is the council okay? Oh, Denald is not okay with us moving.
No, I, do what you will. You all have, I'm one person among 7.
Okay, well, I don't
I'm glad
have,
to be flexible. I'm just pointing out that we have to have 2 people who worked all day that are still here at 8 o'clock, who may wish to offer their expertise and then leave.
okay, all right, then we'll go on to this SLP resolution. Okay.
I read it, so I kind of have some.
I hope so. We received this resolution from PS15. Is anybody from PS15 on the call by chance? I'm not. Somebody could from PS15 was supposed to come. Okay, I'll just read it. PS15, the Patrick F. Daly School Leadership Team Resolution on greater transparency to school-based funding. Whereas New York State Education Law, Section 2598 requires every New York City public school to have a school leadership team. And the SLT is responsible for developing an annual school comprehensive education plan that is aligned with the school-based budget for the ensuing school year. Chancellor's Reg A655 specifies CEPs and school-based budgets should be developed concurrently so that the budget will be aligned with the CEP. Whereas in recent training videos, it was confirmed that a goal of the SLT is to look at school-based budgets and resources to ensure that the school can meet its goals as developed in the CEP. Whereas the process of anticipating and planning for school-based budgeting decisions, and in particular funding variance caused by the mid-year adjustment, is a matter which is of core importance in the role of an SLT, and which would be greatly assisted by clear, timely, and reliable estimates of the amount of funding variance, including how it was calculated. Whereas according to the presentation on the school year 2024-25 school budget allocations and fair student funding proposals, fair student funding makes up 2/3 of most K-12 New York City public school budgets. School-based budgets and is the funding over which principals and SLTs have the most discretion to allocate and spend. And most schools spend well over 90% of their fair student funding on teacher and staff salaries. Whereas the amount of fair student funding a school receives is not fixed, but is adjusted once the school year is underway, as budgets are reconciled to actual enrollment and needs weights from the projected numbers which determined initial allocations. Whereas PS15's budget was adjusted by a total of $323,320 in budget year 23-24. $158,340 in November, December 2024, and $173,295 in February 2024, which represents a 6.8% increase in those funds over what PS15 had to start the year in September 2023. Whereas PS15's official enrollment differs from what was projected for 23-24 by only 12 students, meaning that the scale of the significant budget changes came mostly from changes in the needs of PS15 students. Whereas a substantial portion of PS15's adjustment came from budget adjustments made from PS15's 3 specialized special ed programs, ACES, Access, and dual language ICT, which serve particularly vulnerable and needy students. Whereas PS 15 is not alone in having substantial mid-year adjustments, given that although the DOE does not provide it, data mined from the internet by a PEP member revealed that more than 50% of schools had their fair student funding adjusted by more than 3% up or down in November 2023. Although 90% of fair student funding is used for staff salaries, administrative, teaching, mental health, and support, most of which cannot be adjusted mid-year. Whereas the same volatility that resulted in 23-24 budget lift could just as easily become a devastating budget deficit. And mitigating that risk is therefore a determining factor in every budget decision from class size to hiring to programming. Whereas fiscal responsibility to mitigate that risk obliges PS 15 and other schools to defer decisions without and or implementation of discretionary matters such as academic intervention, enrichment, materials, until the second mid-year adjustment is confirmed in February when the school year is half over. Whereas the Borough Budget Office in recent years has orally communicated an estimate of the fair student funding figures and mid-year adjustments to our principal shortly before the adjustments were made, no information was provided in writing that could be conveyed to the school leadership team. Whereas in 23-24, PS 15 did not receive any information regarding our many requests for clarification about the adjustment methodology, although in prior years, such clarification has resulted in six-figure corrections in PS 15's favor. And despite indications 2023 funding was adjusted contrary to policies in the bilingual special education SAM. Whereas the failure to provide that information renders irrelevant PS 15's attempts to calculate and anticipate its mid-year adjustments, resulting in a budget surprise at every mid-year adjustment, including 23-24. Whereas the surprise addition to PS 15's budget in conjunction with the limited window in which we must spend our funds constrains the ability of the SLT to meaningfully weigh in on the use of this allocation in accordance with CEP goals. Whereas the New York City Council Education Committee has also sought additional information from the DOE on mid-year adjustments, a request repeated in the City Council's 24-25 budget response to the Department of Education at its March 18th, 2024 hearing. Whereas PS 15 can think of no reason timely information on mid-year adjustments cannot be provided to SLTs and other interested parties, since the breakdown is eventually included in the fair student funding detail page for every school when budgets are released the following year. Whereas the school year 24-25 school budget allocation and fair student funding proposals presentation did not include any information on the mid-year adjustments at all, despite the fact that it dictates significant budgetary decisions making as explained above, in particular, the kind of budgetary decisions making into which SLT should be providing input. Whereas this same presentation says on slide 15 that we are continuing to review the formula to address other concerns we have heard about school budgeting in future years, including challenges related to school size and enrollment shifts, but provided no detail on any timeline or process for that review, which would thus seem not to be planned for school year 24-25. Therefore, be it resolved that PS 15 welcomes efforts for greater transparency in school-based budgeting announced in the 24-25 fair student funding presentation, asks that any such transparency include, if not be wholly geared toward SLTs as an audience, so SLTs can be better equipped to provide input into school budget decisions as required by law. Requests that such transparency include detail on the mid-year adjustments, including timely written breakdowns of calculations leading to the adjustments, shared with SLTs in a format that mirrors that of the fair student detail pages online. urgently seek the written breakdown, include much improved clarity in the funding methodology and practice for specialized programs, including providing written breakdowns to principals and SLTs, detailing the calculations that led to specialized funding adjustments at initial allocation and in anticipation of mid-year adjustments, in particular for ACEs, Access, and Island Special Ed programs. Urges the DOE to provide to the public comprehensive data on the mid-year adjustments broken down by school, so broader equity impacts from budget volatility can be understood, particularly given the increased funding directed to schools through needs linked to collective bargaining increases. Urges that the role of mid-year adjustments can be acknowledged in all presentations, discussing their student funding and other contingent allocations, such as empty seat funding and specialized programming, so the public can understand when and how schools are likely to be able to act on funding. Calls upon the DOE to provide more detail on exactly what steps and what timeline the DOE intends to review the formula to address other concerns we have heard about school budgeting in future years, including challenges related to school size and enrollment shifts. When we send this resolution to the chancellor, okay, it's just all the CCs that they have sent it to, imploring them to use their office to bring about an end to the budget upheaval that has limited historically how hundreds of thousands of dollars received mid-year are spent at 15 annually, limiting the ability for the SLT to perform its oversight duties and aligning the budget with our CEC goals and prevents optimal use of funds to meet students' needs, especially our students with special.
I mean, I can start addressing a few of those things if you want. I mean, first, I've never received this resolution. The only resolution I've ever received from them was dated August 3rd of 2022. That was from an SLT that passed in June of 2022. I didn't start my superintendency to July of 2022. So that could be the reason why I was unaware. And they may have sent this to Alvarez instead of Alvarez, because that's happened to me before. But to address some of these things. I also don't see that the principal is part of this SLT members resolution as well, which is concerning to me as there's 3 voting members, or 3 leadership members, which will be the principal. Do you have that on the page?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, it's here, okay. On the next page, got it, okay.
She's there.
Yep, got it. So, news to me, because I would think that as a superintendent, I would be aware of this, but I'm not. But just to address some of the things, CEPs are aligned with the budget, but they're aligned with the budget of the budget that's received. So the schools plan their CEP with the budgets they get. So for example, next week, we told you the 24-25 school year's budget will come out. Schools will align their CEPs to that 24-25 budget that comes out next week. So they don't align their budgets or plan for their school year in November, December, January, February, March. It is, however, a living document that they can make adjustments accordingly. The mid-year adjustments, as you see here, are based on registered projection numbers. So when it comes to the ACEs and Access programs, they get the full amount for the program to run itself. And if money has to be pulled back because they don't have enough students to take the seats, then that's adjusted. And the reason for that is because these are specialized special ed programs. We want to make sure that the students receive the services on the onset and not as a result later on. So they're allocated for the full class. And then if money has to be pulled because there's less students in that class, that will be adjusted later. And that's to make adjustments to ensure that the kids don't lose any services as referenced here in the whereas about losing services for special ed. The second aspect to this is that recently, the DOE has, and I do have them, and I'm willing to share with the council. I just have to make sure that I can. This past year, as a result of the DOE not being as transparent in the past, has come up with a school budget at a glance, which can show you what the allocations are in reference to comparative of how much is paid first per student by year based on the weighted formulas. as well as where schools are putting their funding as it relates to paying for that. This was provided to schools about 2 weeks ago, which is a school at a glance for this year. This happens to be this school where students are funded per student at $45,154 per student. And that's because they have so many weighted categories that puts them in a place where they're able to provide more services for their students compared to another school across the district. SLTs will be getting this in the future, and it will be a public document that will be updated each time. The first adjustment is made at the end of October, where the schools get the money in November, as a result of changes in the number of students first. Then the second change in December is December 30th, or December 31st, I should say, which are changes to L status, ENL status, or special ed status. And that's why that second adjustment happens. The reason behind that is because there might be IEPs between September and December that are adjusted. Students need new services. So that allows for the additional funding to be provided at that time. The initial one is just for register projection. You're projected for these numbers, and schools usually in January, February, and March have the opportunity to appeal their register projection numbers. So if your school is seeing a pattern and trend, which is what the city uses, a pattern and trend, it's not a bullseye, it's a moving target. And we recognize that in the past, it was stronger than it's been now, because in the past we had stabilized numbers. And as a city, since COVID, the numbers have been destabilized in terms of the number for register projection. So what happens is we're going on a 5 to 6 year trajectory of how many students we expect to see at a particular school. And that's what's called the register projection. School leaders, if they feel that they are under register projections, can require a request an appeal and give their rationale. So in this particular school year, we had about 15 schools who put in appeals because they felt their registers were lower. And about 6 or 7 of them got approved for their appeals, which means they were going to be funded for more students. During the budget conversations that will happen next week, schools work with their budget directors to set aside money in the event that they have a registered gain or registered loss. It's already separated just in case. As you saw, and in the past 5 years, schools have been held harmless. It's being done yet again by the DOE, where they're being held harmless for registered loss or projections. What I would advise the school to do is spend the money they have on everything they need to know that they need to have. In terms of dealing with whether or not they're in a deficit or not, that is something that the DOE will work with that school to make sure. People are not going to lose their jobs in the middle of the school year. We're not going to excess teachers in January because you don't have the money to fund. They will find ways to have discretionary funding that still exists to be able to provide to supplement the cost, and then figure out what, if anything, the school would be responsible for towards the end of the year. I encourage the school to spend the money that they get and spend it for all the things that they had planned for in their CEP that they were budgeted for. If in November they see an increase, they should be going on to their CEP again with their SLTs and making adjustments to the budget allocations in their CEP. All of the schools in District 15 this past year, 75% of our schools use the progress monitoring tool on the iPlan portal, which is great because next year all schools have to use it. So all schools know how to actually set up for funding in advance. There have been some nuances at 15 that has to do with when the money is actually provided to the school. And in some cases that has to do with the actual SAM, which is the school allocation memorandum that provides a specific funding for a specialized program that's separate from their fair student funding, contract for excellence funding that they get, and also additional funding. It is true that in many schools, a large percentage of teachers are paid through fair student funding. The reason why that's done is because fair student funding already includes the fringes when paying for teachers. Where if you use other funding, for example, Title I funding to supplement for a teacher, they're going to pull some more money out to pay for fringe costs. So most schools use their fair student funding to place for that. What a lot of schools do is they will place that fair student funding first, but then when they're able to allocate other money in mid-years and throughout the year, they readjust that money and move it around because it's almost like making a dime out of 15 cents, right? Making a dollar out of 15 cents, right? You can actually do that with your budget if you plan, because you might allocate some funds towards a teacher and then later on, a Title I funding for a teacher, for example, and then later on, cover it with fair student funding. When you do that, you get your fringe money back. So you're kind of making like $20,000 to $25,000 more that you can then allocate to other things. So I'm not sure how this resolution is. I believe that the DOE started with their transparency in terms of the school budgets at a glance to provide more transparency. That's gonna be a live document. SLTs will be able to see that on a constant basis that actually shows the allocations. And in fact, every school shows a different allocation for how much money is spent per student per capita. So for example, to Donalda's point in the past where she was talking about equity in terms of funding for schools, I can look at a school like 24 and compare it to 321 and say that 124 students per student is getting more money per student than 321 school. And that's because of the weighted measures will show why. There's because at 124, there's more students in temporary housing, there's more students in special ed, there's more L students. So each of those have added weights, which will show that that school will have allocated more money per student per capita compared to another student. So for example, in the school that we're talking about right now, $45,154 in this fiscal year was spent per student at this particular school on average, right? That's right. That amounts to 114% more than the New York City Public Schools average of $21,112 school year funding. So on average, the city spends about $21,112 when you average everyone's budget. What it's showing is that this school is getting 114% more than the average for the city. And the reason behind it is because they have more economically need index. They have more students with disabilities. They have more Black students. They have more Hispanic students. And so those are variables that increase the weights for the schools. The reason why they can't get an exact number and it's a verbal number is because we go away for the December break, we come back and there's loss of students, there's gain of students, people come in the new year. So it's a moving target to say, you're expected to get $45,000 and then 3 kids leave your school in that December break and you lose those special ed kids, now you don't get those $43,000. So to tell a school, you're going to receive this money, and then after December 31st, when the numbers are audited to see what special ed numbers you have and ENL students you have, and then that number changes, that school is not going to get that. What happens when the school then starts spending that money prior to? I will agree that it's terrible that schools are getting that funding in February. But because the way the state is designed when it comes to when allocations can be funded, it impacts our ability to be able to do that when we're a system with 1,700 schools. It takes time to process the exact numbers to make sure that schools are allocated what they deserve to get. So it's to some extent an inconvenience, but nonetheless, they're getting what they deserve. We as superintendents have conversations with our school leaders to think about how are they going to maximize the resources from February on. In this particular case, it was a total of $173,000 that had to be planned for. From my perspective, if you're planning to prepare for at least $100,000 gain, you should think about what programs are going to be allocated for that. If you know you're going to get an increase in funding, you should think about how you're paying for your after school for that portion of the particular year and allocating the funding there. I'm not necessarily sure that anything that you do as a CEC will make an impact with a resolution for this, because the DOE is trying to address these gaps system-wide, and we've started. So like I'm showing an example of one where it's been started, and there are other measures. We've also been working with schools to have those conversations. As you even heard in here, they're having verbal conversations. The verbal is to say, as of today, like December 4th, you're gonna get approximately $150,000. But December 10th, that can change, right? And that is also impacted by how schools quickly complete, for example, IEP processes. So it takes 10 days and also the effective date of the IEP in which is taken into account. If schools, for example, schedule a meeting on December 22nd and mom doesn't show up on December 22nd, guess what's gonna happen? That meeting's not gonna happen until January. So what happens? You're not gonna get the funding for that student. Just like you wouldn't get the funding for the student if the student shows up to your school November 1st, because the cutoff date is October 31st. All these things impact the variables of how schools are allocated. Schools are aware of this. They have been given the processes and they are part of the due process in ensuring that they get the funding that they're supposed to. But as I stated, and going back to my first comment, next week they get budgets. They should be aligning those budgets to the current CEPs that they're all planning right now. They've all been informed. You don't plan based on state standardized assessments. You plan based on the assessments and data you have at your schools that are qualitative and quantitatively. And those goals should align to the DCEP, which is the district goals. All schools have been working on that. My district team has been monitoring the CEP's progress, and they will be getting feedback in the summer. So this is an ongoing process. So again, from my perspective, and anything you want to add, Linda, I don't see anything here that's not necessarily being done. So for example, they mentioned ACs and access. They get the full funding for that. Funding might be taken away if they don't fill the seats. They get the full funding for all the students that they're accounted for. They had a mid-year adjustment of $158,000. Yes, it's a 6.8% increase. But when you divide those two, those increases are for separate reasons. One is for register. That alone is a separate entity. That's a moving target. The other one is accounting for IEPs. That could be IEPs that are generated between September and December. And that could be any student coming new to the school from Florida or from another state that needs an IEP. That could be a parent who puts in a request for evaluation for their child and turns out to be an IEP. So those are all variables that are impacted by the decisions of how schools get more money or less money. To the point of the PEP, I can't speak to that. I don't know who the PEP member is, and I don't know where the PEP member got their numbers. So I think
In the interest of time,
Yeah.
I want to table this, and maybe this is something the liaison for PS15, I'm not sure if anybody hears it, maybe have a conversation, reach out to them and have a conversation with them about this, and maybe there's some aspect of it we can support. I think we're gonna table it for now.
Yeah, and I will see if I can get this to the CEC. I know every principal has this, so any CEC member wants to talk to the direct principal about this, they should be able to share this. Every single principal received this 2 weeks ago. I have the full report. What I'll do is I'll speak to the budgeting office to see if I'm able to release this. I think I should be able to. Once I do, I'll make a copy and send it to CEC 15's email, and you guys will have access to it for each of your schools.
Okay, thank you.
And you should be getting more access to this throughout the year, because this is gonna be the document that you guys will be able to have even more transparency of what's happening at each school.
All right, we don't have that much time, so I want to.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I want to, okay. So we have a CEC member. I'm obligated to take public comment on the candidates who are available to us, and the two remaining candidates are Dana Ashley and Katina Rogers. So if there is anybody on the Zoom who would like to make.
Is there anybody on Zoom who would like to make a public comment about the two candidates who are looking to fill the vacancy? That appears.
Okay. So, looks like we just lost it.
It's to the background.
Yeah, okay. So then I'm gonna make a motion to go into executive session. Antonio Ferrero votes yes, to go into executive session. Leslie King. Yes. Yes, it's all. Donalda, you can just not join us.
Right, are we taking a vote?
We're taking a vote to go into executive session, but you don't have to you can just vote to allow us to go into the executive session and then not participate.
Okay, I'm just gonna stick with my own right to decide my vote and say no.
Okay.
Thank
all
you.
right. That means we can't go into executive session.
Really? Why?
Because we need 7 people to vote on anything. We always need a quorum.
You can go into executive session without, it doesn't have to be a unanimous vote to go into executive session. Ever since we had our first executive session, I've always voted no, and we have always gone into executive session anyway. So
That's true. Okay, you said no, okay, Lauren Barkin?
yes.
Daley's not even here.
She's in the bathroom.
She's right
Uh,
there.
Danley, we would like to, there's a motion on the table to go into executive session to, just discuss the member vacancy. Do you support going into executive session?
Majority vote.
Well,
The majority vote is yes.
yeah. Okay, all right, we're gonna go into executive session. I'm uncertain whether, can you do that, but. Yeah.
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 See you guys when you get back.
Ask for CC member comment.
Sure, Melba, Stanley, Lauren, Vanessa, Martha, Antonia.
I just will say they were all really great candidates and, they're looking to have such. We held an executive session. The people in the room agreed to go forward with Tina Rogers, who, well, I'll just say, we agreed to go forward with Tina Rogers, seating. Tina Rogers. Can I motion for executive session? Yeah. I just. Okay. Okay, I guess, everybody on that? Okay, very confused, but I guess we have to go back in executive session. Let's just do this. So the members want to conduct this for a little bit. We have two eligible parents for the seat, Katina Rogers and Dana Ashley. I'm going to just publicly state well, you call the roll.
Sure.
And then everybody will just state who they want to take the seat. That's all.
Okay, I'm just gonna go around.
Yeah, okay. I, Katina Rogers.
That's it.
Rogers.
Vanessa, Laura. Family.
You go, you can look.
Okay. Donalda.
I don't have any, so I'll abstain.
Well, then we can't see it.
Sure you can.
No,
You
we
can always
cannot.
have a majority
No,
vote
no,
with
no,
a
no,
quorum.
no,
It
no.
doesn't have to
you
be
can't.
unanimous.
No, it has to be 7 people. It's not that it has to be unanimous. It has to be 7 people have to ratify anything on the council. There's a resolution, a new person. There's no majority vote on the council. So if we don't have 7 votes in favor of one person, we'll have no, we'll have to do it next week. If we have quorum.
Where does it say in the bylaws?
In the
that we
bylaws.
can't have a majority.
There's never majority vote on the council's hearing. It always has to be at least 7 people.
Okay, I won't belabor the point. That's fine. I'll count my vote with a majority, whomever that is. You're up.
I vote for Katina, family.
Perfect.
Can you just state like who you're gonna for the record? Cause I'm gonna say in the minutes who you voted for, like I have to say.
I've agreed to vote with the majority. I tried to abstain. The bylaws aren't available. It's fine.
The bylaws are available. I can pull them up right now and read them for you. This is like. So, on the top of page 12 in the bylaw, it says. No fewer than 7 members must be present to constitute a quorum, and no fewer than 7 votes are needed to carry any motion or adopt a resolution.
In that case, what is the individual's name that everybody else has voted for?
Katina Rogers.
I will vote for Katina Rogers. You're welcome.
And Lauren Barker, you voted for Tina Rogers, and Danley. She voted Tina Rogers. And Jonathan, you voted for?
I did.
Okay, so we. 7 people, Tina Rogers, congratulations, and I'm going to reach out to you, to begin the onboarding process. There was, you said there was some.
Yeah, so Betty Bybush
Betty, how are you?
wanted to make a couple announcements before we.
Hi
adjourn.
there.
Sure. Hi.
Yeah.
Nice to
Hi,
see you.
CEC 15. Yeah, so I'm the chair of the Youth Education and Cultural Affairs Committee on Community Board 2. We only have part of your district, mostly along Pacific Street, 261, 38, High School for the Arts, the new school on State Street, and the middle school, I think it's 447. Yeah, so every year we're required to submit a district statement of needs for our District CB2. We put out inquiries to 13 and 15. We got lots of response from 13 about playgrounds, auditoriums, and so on. It doesn't mean that there'll be funding, but this is another way for the school communities to say, this is what we need, this is why, this is the problem, and this is how students will benefit. So I invite you to communicate with us. I'll give you the email. Schools can communicate with us. We've been successful at some points. We're not always successful, but it's another venue to get funding and to be in the public eye. The email is to the Community Board 2 office borange@cb-nyc.gov. Schools can do that, or your group, the CEC 15 can do that, the superintendent can do that. We work on this in the summer, and sometimes we get results for our young people, which is a good thing. That was announcement number 1.
Chat, did you put the email in the chat?
I will, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and the other thing, in my other life, I'm the co-leader of Garden Train, which supports school gardens throughout District 15. We are having a special meeting at and I will send you this to your office, at the Gowanus Canal Conservancy, the Lowlands Nursery. And schools will have an opportunity to buy native plants at discounted prices for school gardens. They will meet with other school gardeners, and yeah, it'll be a great day. Saturday, June 15th at 1 o'clock at the Lowlands Nursery, which is across from Lowe's on 9th Street near Smith Street. I'll put that in the chat. I'll send that to CEC. Thank you very much and have a great evening.
Thank you. Please email us all that information. And you might expect a very long document from us in return. All right, well, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn this meeting at 8:42. Anybody want a second?
A second.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Have a good night. I'll see you, some of you I might see Saturday. For the, thank you. This is a team learning together event. Hopefully I'll see you at the 18th event and at the otherwise, our next calendar business meeting is the 25th.
Thank you, interpretation. That's nice.
Oh, we can go home now? Thank you. Have a